bass.
Welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine. If you enjoy this programming, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Join Truth and Rhythm's membership program through Patreon. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkandstuff.net. At that site, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk. Shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm.
I am delighted to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership bassist Hubert Eaves IV, son of a previous guest on this show, Mr. Hubert Eaves III, who is best known for his work with Mtume and D-Train. In addition to collaborations with his father, Hubert Eaves IV has worked with Will Downing, Erykah Badu, Jocelyn Brown, and Glenn Jones, among others. In 2022, he showed his flair for funky contemporary jazz with the catchy single under his own name called Dot Dee Da. And now, going even deeper into the groove for 2023, he has unleashed Incubated Funk with features past guests of the show, the Chops Horns. Hubert, how are you, man? Thanks for joining the show.
All right. I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah, so it looks like you're in your little studio there. Where are you about in the country?
I'm in Jersey, New Jersey, Jersey City, in my my music lab, where I spend most of my time. I see you're kind of in your lab too. I see the plaques back there. I see a guitar. Okay. Nice.
Hey, it makes life worth living, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Never a dull moment.
Yeah. So is that where you're from originally?
Originally, I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay.
But we left Minneapolis when I was so young. And first we went to California, and I think I was about 5 years old. And then when I was around 6, we came to New York. So I'm basically a New Yorker. I claim New York, but I got love for Minneapolis and my family and my people out there. But I kind of got my stripes in Brooklyn.
Understand. Well, thank you for doing the show. I appreciate it. Been looking forward to talking to you. Love the bass players especially. And
yes.
I can see some of your weapons behind you, so that's always cool. And we're gonna have some fun here. So let's jump back. You're saying where you've lived and all that, but obviously your dad, but what drew you to music? Was it like something you just could not avoid, or how did you get such an affinity for it?
I'm going to say probably that I couldn't avoid it because it was always around me. My dad from when I was a little tot, I just remember him always playing music, whether he was playing piano or drums or the record player. It was just always music on. So I kind of just naturally just had an attraction to it.
And how did you gravitate to the bass in particular?
It's funny, bass. I used to be in a band. I played drums in a band called Starburst. I was around 9 years old. And whenever we would take breaks, the bass player would put his bass down and I would pick it up and just mess around with it. And I just had a lot of fun. And my dad was kind of like watching me saying, I wonder if this kid wants to play bass. Because as soon as my bass player would put that bass down, I'm picking it up, playing it. And then he started jumping on the drums. And to this day, he's the drummer. And then I'm playing bass. That's funny. But that was my first introduction to bass.
And where was your dad in his career when you came along?
My dad was, back then, he was primarily playing jazz, from what I remember. And I think he was working with like Norman Connors, Carlos Garnett, Gary Bartz, and a little later on with Mtume and that whole crew. And just always doing something. And I was always there at the rehearsals or in the basement when he was practicing, learning music or writing music. So, I mean, it was just always around me. And, wherever my dad went, I wanted to go. If it was involved in music, I was like, hey, over here. Can I go? And he always took.
And do you have siblings or it's just you?
So I have two sisters.
And are they musical?
And yeah, they're musical. And my sister Dana, she actually does all my digital artwork and all my social media stuff, and gives me great advice. And she's a singer, she's a writer, she's starting to produce her own material. And my older sister Vicky, I'm sure if she wanted to do anything musical, she could if she wanted to. So it's definitely in the blood.
Do you remember a particular point where you saw your dad in the studio or on stage and just kind of clicked, like, that he was at a high level,
I think it was times in this recording studio, especially when he was with Mtume, and I would see certain celebrities come in and string sections, and the studios were very elaborate, and it was just amazing to me, just as a kid, just watching all of that. And I mean, to me, he was just dad. I didn't know, the magnitude of where he stood in the music business, and what his goals and dreams were. I just knew that was my dad. He plays music. He takes me everywhere he goes, and I want to do the same thing. And that's kind of like what happened. My parents gave me no choice, man. This is like, here, do music. Almost like a punishment. You're going to do music.
Or else, yeah.
Or else.
What do you remember? What can you share with us about Mtume?
I remember Mtume, he was very, very nice to me. He was always just real cool. Whenever I was in the studio, he would always come and talk to me and, ask me what I was up to. And matter of fact, I remember one gig they had, they used to do a skit with the drummer, Howard King. He would leave the drums and he would go to the front of the stage and do his bit, talk to the audience and things like that. So they asked me, I was 10 years old. I said, look, it's only for about like 5 minutes, 6 minutes. All you got to do is hold the groove, play a straight beat. You want to do it? And I was like, of course. I was nervous, but I wanted to do it. And that was back when they were kind of like in the kind of Parliament garb and the hats and the crazy costumes. So I had on a costume, and I went up there and I held it down. And I remember at the end in the dressing room, somebody came to me. I don't remember who it was, but they said, "Hey, Mtume wants to see you in his room." And I went to Mtume's room and he said, "You did great, man. Here." And he handed me a $20 bill. And that was like probably $500 back then. I couldn't believe I had $20 that I actually made, that I worked for. So I was really happy with that, and I never forgot that. So thank you, Tume. Rest in peace.
Yes, absolutely. Rest in peace.
Yeah,
Wow, your first paid gig,
that was it. That was my first paid gig, man.
Wow. Now, did you, travel with your father on the tour, or you just kind of popped up when he was playing locally, or how did that work?
Just locally. I never went on tour with him. If they had shows in town or rehearsals, studio, that kind of stuff, I was really game for. But because I was in school and stuff, so I kind of had to stay home with my mom and my sisters. But if they were in rehearsal studios or if they were in recording studios, I was there, eating the bad food and everything.
I'm thinking it must have been a trip, though, seeing, strangers kind of react to what your father was doing at first, and seeing how much joy he was able to bring them through music.
Yeah, I'm sure that I probably had moments like that, but my memories were I just had fun. I think because I was so young, how kids are, things kind of just go like right over your head. So if there were any kind of weird moments, I was just oblivious to it. I was just like into the music and just watching. I used to really like looking at the mixing console. It used to really amaze me. I used to think, as you get older and you realize what's going on with it, that, one strip it's the same. It's the same thing, but I'm looking at these buttons and I'm like, how do they ever know how to work all of this stuff? I mean,
Like
look at all these
NASA
buttons.
or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, it was always fun.
As you got into your teens and a little bit older with your musical pursuits, who were some of your biggest influences, on bass and just in music in general?
My biggest influence on bass, my absolute biggest influence was Bootsy. I used to call myself Hutesy. I was just like, I just couldn't get enough of Bootsy, man. Just the look, the way he talked, and his groove, the bass. When I saw that space bass, and I'm like, who is this dude? And I mean, he was just so funky, so cool. I just wanted to be like Bootsy. But then, the later on as I got older, I started, listening to other musicians and bass players, and of course, Larry Graham. I really like Prince on bass. He's definitely one of my favorite bass players. He was just like, he had an attack and a touch, like, just it was his own. I mean, that guy could really play some funk and some R&B, and I love the way he played ballads, how he just laid in the cut. And uh, Marcus Miller, he's one of, like, you know, when I think of Marcus, not only is he to me one of the greatest bass players, that I've ever heard, but his production, his writing, um, his improv, just totally complete bass player, complete in every way, songwriter, production, all of the tours, all of the work that he's done. Big fan of Marcus. Byron Miller, I love Byron Miller. And a lot of my friends, man, I get asked this question a lot, and a lot of my friends who, they may not be as famous, but some of these cats, man, they play things that are like, nobody's playing, you know. So many guys, man, and girls. Esperanza, she's one who is just absolutely amazing. She just blows me away. Her singing, her playing, her writing. Just so many musicians, man. I could go on forever.
Now, when you were a kid or teenager, whenever, did you get to see Bootsy at all?
hmm Yeah, I saw Bootsy, I think, in '75. Uh, I seen him a couple of times. I seen him with Parliament. I seen him alone. And funny story, true story. Later on, as a young adult, I was touring with Freddie Jackson, and we were in Anaheim, California. And the group of guys that I was actually on tour with, we were all actually friends. You know, a lot of times you end up on tour and you're just with hired guns. You don't know each other. Sometimes you get along, sometimes you don't. But this group, we were actually friends. We hung out after the gigs, you know, in the summertime. You know, we were really close friends. So they knew me very well. They knew how much respect I had for Bootsy. So I'm in a dressing room, you know, before the gig, and one of my best friends, his name was Fritz Cadet. He's passed, you know, R.I.P. Fritz. He came to me. He said, "Hugh, don't go nowhere. Stay right here. I got a surprise for you." I was like, "What? What's up?" He goes, "Don't go nowhere." I said, "All right." So I'm just sitting in the dressing room, you know, noodling on my bass, whatever. Fritz comes in, you know, with this guy and looks at me like, and the guy's looking at me, and I'm like, "Hey, what's up, man? How are you?" So he looks at my friend Fritz and he goes, "Wow, does he always like treat his idols this way?" And I said, "What?" Fritz said, "Hubert, this is Bootsy." I said, "That ain't no Bootsy. You know, I know Bootsy. That ain't Bootsy. He was an impersonator." So the cat looks at me like, "Wow, man, this is really embarrassing." So my man Fritz and the rest of the guys were really pissed off at me because they all thought it was the real Bootsy. And they were like, the guy, you know, he left and they were like, "Hugh, why would you do that, man? That was messed up, you know. And I thought you loved Bootsy." I kept saying, "Look, that's not Bootsy. I know Bootsy." We got over it, did the show. The next day we had a day off. So we're all hanging out in one room. MTV News comes on. Breaking story. Bootsy impersonator caught in Anaheim, California. He had signed some bad checks in Bootsy's name and had booked some shows in Bootsy's name. And I turned around and looked at them and they were like, "Holy shit, how did you know?" And I was like, "I know Bootsy, man. As soon as I saw him, I knew it wasn't him." Fast forward, I'm playing with Erykah Badu. We're playing in Cincinnati. And I'm backstage just walking around, you know, I forgot what act was on. I was kind of checking them out backstage. And in the corner, I see Bootsy. I had never met him. And I said, "You know what? I'm not going to blow this opportunity." So I walked up to him and I said, "You know, excuse me, Bootsy. My name is Hubert Eaves IV. I'm a bass player." He cut me off. He said, "I know who you are." I said, "Yeah, man, you killed on that record." And I was like, "What?" So I thanked them and we shook hands, we hugged. And I said, "Hey, man, I got to tell you a quick story if you got a second." He was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And I told him that Bootsy story. And he laughed and he said, "Man, you don't know how much money that guy cost me, you know, legal fees. I got promoters, you know, calling my house." And he goes, "I'm just glad that they caught him." So I think to this day, I'm like, what an amazing story, you know, amazing
Wow.
for me to be able to tell him that.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I remember that story and I saw it resurfaced again somewhere that on like social media that had happened, you know, with the Bootsy impersonator, but I never spoke or knew anybody who actually encountered the impersonator. So that's wild.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was wild.
You're like, you know, you got your Bootsy detector, you know, bogus detector. It's like on high alert.
Yeah,
you know?
man. Don't come to me talking about your Bootsy, man, because I'm gonna get you. Bootsy's gonna get you.
I imagine if you had tried to put a bass in that guy's hands too, he probably would have fumbled quite a bit.
Probably. Yeah. That would have blown it. I should have gave him a bass, man. He was, "Nah, you know, my fingers are hurting right now."
Man, so but you also saw Bootsy play in his prime, which is just awesome because I got to see him in '78, and you know, I've seen maybe some shows that were as good, but I can't say I've ever seen a better show.
Yeah, that show was amazing, man. I mean, it was so funky, and they had the mothership, and
Tight.
it was tight as hell. And they had so many musicians on stage. There was just so much going on, And I remember I was actually there with my dad and Mtume. And I remember at one point I ended up on my dad's shoulders, and I would be on Mtume's shoulders because I couldn't see. And I was just blown away, man. And after that, I also saw Earth, Wind, and Fire, and it was just, this is what I want to do. I mean, these guys are like, I mean, you don't see stuff like that anymore, And not that people aren't out, they're not out here doing it, because there's plenty of bands and musicians that are bringing it. They just don't get the shine, that they deserve. So you really got to go looking for that stuff.
Yeah. So did you ever get to see Larry Graham play? Or
never? I never got a chance to see him play. I want to, even now, because he's still killing, man. He's so funky, and his tone, the sound of his bass. A couple times when I've had basses made, they would say, "What are you looking for?" I say, "Larry Graham. I want that tone, that he had." And of course, they're not making instruments like they were back then, but also it's in your fingers, it's your touch. That's just his touch. So you can come close, but that's his thing. So I leave it alone. I try to go for my thing. But if I could get close to that, whew, that tone he had on Thank You, come on, man. I know you felt it.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I got to see him in 79, and then saw him come back in the 90s. And man, when he came back in the 90s, it was just fire. I saw him play at the House of Blues. It was incredible. He brought Graham Central Station back, in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And like you said, he can still kill it.
He's killing, man. And the thumping, he's the one that started it. And still sounds good at it, still killing at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tell you, another cat that I'm really, really enjoying too, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon, but it's Mono Neon. Bow Down. He's just ridiculous, man. Ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm hoping to have him on the show at some point here soon. So.
Oh, yeah. I'll be tuned in for that one. For sure.
Yeah. And two guys who eventually played with Prince too, Graham and Mono Neon, late,
That's right
near the end for Prince. But yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were, doing your thing, how intuitive or easy did it come to you? And how hard did you have to work at it?
I think I would have to say that music, it's in my family. It's like on my dad's side. Of course, my dad, he plays keyboards, drums. My grandfather played a few different instruments. My uncles play. Uncle Kevin plays bass. So I just think that it's in the blood, it's in my family. And I loved it. I loved it from when I was a kid. It wasn't grueling for me, where it was like, you go practice. Now, I didn't want to practice at times when my friends were outside, playing basketball and things like that. But I enjoyed playing. So whenever I played, I always enjoyed it, And drums was my first instrument. And it came pretty naturally. I just kind of felt it. I would play with records, different kind of, styles and grooves. And I just have fun with it, man. Just a different kind of beats and rhythms. And then when I got to, when I started playing bass, I kind of I'm a very rhythmic bass player, that's from playing drums. So I kind of just merged the two. And I used to do what I call ghetto multi-tracking. Back in the day, I would have like 3 tape recorders, and I'd play a drum beat on one tape recorder and play, press play on that one, record on the second one, the bass part. And I had a guitar, and I would just keep, going back and forth until I would complete whatever idea I had. And that's how it started in terms of me writing songs. And then maybe when I was about 14, 15, my dad gave me a 4-track cassette player, Fostex X15. I remember the model. And I went nuts with that thing, man. I learned how to bounce tracks, and I was doing like complete songs and vocals and just had a lot of fun with it. And I just kept going. It was just something that I really, really enjoyed. It was kind of like my arcade. It was just doing music and having fun with it. And it's still fun.
Who are a couple of the drummers that are among your favorites for their pocket feel and that kind of thing?
Well, I gotta shout out my man Pooji Bell. You know that because from firsthand experience, that cat, he knows how to he don't budge, he don't move, he doesn't play no unnecessary fills, so his pocket is like legit. Of course, Dennis Chambers. I love Dennis. So many guys. Tony Thompson, I really used to enjoy from Chic. He was a killer. His groove was just something else, man. R.I.P. to him. And I got a bunch of friends, man, who were like, these guys are just scary, man. I don't want to start naming them because, I leave one out, they're going to be mad at me, but they all know who they are,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the two you named,
so many great musicians.
The two that you named that are still with us have both graced me with being on the show. So among my favorites too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So how did things progress for you as a young man, and music? What was the first recording session that you were ever part of?
The very first recording session that I did was with a good friend of mine, Will Downing, because we went to high school together. And his very first demo, I played on. I played bass on it. And I think that was the first professional recording that I did, where we were actually in a real studio. And, back then we were all in the room. It was live from beginning to end. If one person messed up, do it over. So that was my very first recording, actually. Shout out to Will. WD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you participated in some of the D Train stuff, right?
Oh yeah. I played on drum fills on You're the One for Me. I played bass on a few different songs. I think Keep Giving Me Love, I played bass on. There was a song called In Your Eyes that I had actually co-wrote with my dad and James Williams. And I'm playing bass on that. I played drums on a couple songs. So yeah, I was definitely part of that crew. They didn't let me do like the complicated songs, because I was young and sometimes I would play too many fills and, get a little excited in the studio. But, the stuff that they knew that I could handle, they would put me on. And I appreciate it, man, because that experience, and just being part of history like that is, no one can take that away from me. So I'm definitely grateful for that time.
How did you feel and react when that song first popped on the radio and you heard it?
It's funny. You're the One for Me. I remember I was in Minneapolis for the summer. It was school break. And I got a call from my dad. And I think one of my aunts said, "Hey, your dad's on the phone." And my dad said, "Hey, little Hugh, I want you to hear something." And it was "You're the One" for me, just the track. It had no vocals. He had just finished doing the track. And he said, "This is going to be something." And only thing I remember musically, I remember listening on that phone, and I was like, what the hell is this? It was so funky, so different, and he had done a lot of funky tracks and, things that impressed me back then. But I remember to this day when I heard You're the One for me, it was just something different. It was just something special. I'm not going to pretend like I knew it was a hit and all of that stuff, because I didn't. I just knew that it was funky. It was different, and I felt it. And the rest is history with that track. To this day, you can put it on and it still stands up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That synth riff is just, it just goes into your brain, man.
I know. And I thought about doing a remake on it, but I said, you know what? I'm not stepping into that trap, man. Some songs you leave alone, especially when they're done so well, because the critics are going to come at you and say, nah, you should have left that alone. You're never going to do it as good as the original. So I said, I'm going to leave it alone for now.
Yeah. Maybe busting it out on stage during a show is one thing, but yeah.
Yeah.
Committing a new version.
Yeah. Why? I'll just I'll bust out in a gig or something on one of my gigs. Maybe we can go into it and break it down a little bit. But to totally just remake that song, that would be a challenge.
How did James impress you early on?
He was flawless, and he still is. It's like it just, in general, singers always kind of blew me away, just how they could just navigate, just, effortlessly, the great singers. They're all, and I'm just like, because I can't do it. I'm like, how the hell are you doing that? And D, whether it's funk, whether it's, blues or jazz or something just really, really beautiful and melodic, he can do it all. And I remember watching him doing background sessions. Oh, he's doubling his vocals and boom, just knocking stuff out. Boom, waste no time, and he was a young man. And I've also had the pleasure of working with him in the studio as a producer. And just, you don't have to tell him what to do. He just does it, You can say, I want something like this. Okay. I want to do something really, really interesting, with the back. Okay. And he just knocks it out, man. So he's one of those singers that I wish more people knew about him, because the people in the industry, singers, the real singers, they know. They give him his props. But I just wish that the world could get a taste of who he is, because he's something else. He's something else, man. Special.
And I also think he doesn't bring any of that baggage that some singers bring. He's, not a, for lack of a better term, not a diva, not a prima donna. He just, let's do it. Let's get it done. Positive, and energetic.
He's very positive, energetic, and funny as hell, man. He'll just keep you. You won't. Sometimes you can't even get no work done because he have you cracking up so bad. And Will Down is the same way. Just hilarious.
Yeah, I haven't met him yet, but I'll probably get him on the show at some point too.
Oh yeah. You'll have fun.
Because so many people have referenced him. He's worked with so many people that have been on the show. I got to talk to him at this point.
Oh, you know what? You'll have fun with him because Will is a bass head. He loves great bass players. And if you check out his body of work. The bass players that he uses are just incredible, man. Always, he's always been into that. So you'll have fun with him. I'm gonna tell him too.
Appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
So from D Train, what was the next, thing of note that you were part of that you got to dip into?
From D Train, I was in high school, so right in like when I finished my senior year, I had met a friend, Alex Mosley, guitar player, through another guitar player friend, Gary Paulson. And Alex Mosley, called him Spanador. He's a guitar player, a bass player, a keyboard player, a writer, a producer. And to this day, he's one of the absolute best musicians that I ever met. He's the kind of guy that could pick up a bass, burn you on your bass, burn you on your guitar, and then he's burning on keyboards. And I mean, I've been in the studio with him. He's the type of musician who can, say, for instance, he gets a new keyboard, has a sequencer, and he's just trying to give you a demo of the keyboard. He's like, oh, it can do this. Boom, he plays a keypad. And then he can do this. He puts a bass to it. He doesn't even realize what he's doing. And I'm in producer mode at that point, and I'm like, what are you going to do with that? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, Alex, that's a song, man. He's like, I was just messing around. Delete, gets rid of it. And I'm like, talented like that. But anyway, he was in the band Lisa and Cold Jam, and they were looking for a bass player. No, they were looking for a drummer, because I played drums and bass with Lisa and Cold Jam, but I came in playing drums. So I went down and I auditioned, and that was my first tour. That was my first big tour. And that was a lot of fun. To this day, out of all of the situations that I've been in musically, that was the absolute most fun I ever had, because I was young. I was like 19, 20, and we were making money and we were traveling, and the shows were sold out, and it was just big scale. And, I didn't get a chance to get, how as musicians, as we get older, we get a little jaded. We get a little like skeptical, and, because, you get burned here and there, and you get your feet wet. You start to realize that this is a business. It's not always going to be fun like that. But back then it was just straight fun. We were playing music, playing sports, and, buying remote control cars and just doing all kind of nonsense, having food fights and just crazy. But yeah, that was my first big tour.
Did they have more than the one hit at that point, or did they have a few hits by then?
At that point, it was "I Wonder If I Take You Home." That was, their big hit, and I toured with them for about like 4 or 5 years, I think. So they went on to have huge success. They had Head to Toe, All Cried Out, Lost in Emotion. And, I played, I goofed up. I got to rewind real quick. I didn't go in to the band playing drums. I went in playing bass. I first played bass with them. And then maybe 3 years down the line, our drummer, Ollie Ferguson, he got murdered. And we had a gig opening for David Bowie at Giant Stadium. And, we were all grieving his death, but we still had this show that we had to do. And full force, the production and writing team, and Lisa and Mike and Alex, they were kind of like, what are we going to do? How are we going to get a drummer that could learn the show? I mean, it was a pretty elaborate show back then. What are we going to do? So I remember I think I was talking with Alex, and I said, hey, man, I could do it. And he was like, really? I'm like, yeah, I could do it on drums. So they spoke to Full Force and to Mike and Lisa and Alex. They got together and they were like, let's try it. So I got on drums. My bass tech, his name was Gary Augustus. He got on bass, and I did the show. And from that point on, I was the drummer. I stayed on drums, and Gary became the bass player.
Wow. So, what a situation to step in.
Yeah, it was weird, you know. It was very, very emotional, you know, because me and Ali, we were roommates, you know, on the road. You know, he's a very, very nice guy, very talented guy. So, you know, but we had to move on. So that's how that went down.
Mm. Well, I was going to ask you too about Full Force's role, you know, in the tour itself. Were they present? Did they tour with them, or they just popped in certain shows, or how did that work?
Well, Full Force, they were the ones running everything pretty much. I mean, our live show, Mike, Alex, and Lisa, they had the majority of the creative input was coming from them. Full Force would oversee everything. You know, if they would come to the rehearsals or they would come to the shows, and for the most part, they enjoyed it. Every once in a while, they would say, "Hey, you know, you guys could do this, or you may want to try this or try that to enhance the show." And sometimes, like Bow-Legged Lou might come and sing "All Cried Out" with Lisa, you know, as a guest. But I don't remember us touring much together. You know, they kind of did their own tours, and you know, we did things here and there together. But pretty much, when Lisa exploded, you know, she was kind of on her own. But you know, under the guidance of Full Force at that time.
So when you were playing bass, was there choreography? I'm thinking if there was, then at least when you went to drums, you didn't have to do the choreography.
Hey man, you said it. Because I'm not much of a dancer, man. You know, I'm kind of like, you know, in the background. You know, I do my side step. Matter of fact, they used to tease me because I couldn't get the choreography. They used to have all these steps. I used to just do my own version. So they would laugh at me, but I didn't care. But yeah, I've always felt more comfortable playing drums because, you know, I don't have to be up there moving and dancing and stuff. So yeah, that was a plus. Big plus.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkandstuff.net. Thank you very much.